Young man from the hood wins elite university scholarship. His first day leaves everyone stunned. Hello, welcome, leave a like, subscribe, activate notifications, and enjoy this story. The day had finally come. Miguel, a young man from a neighborhood where hope is a luxury, stood at the gates of the prestigious university, a place where dreams are supposed to come true. But as he stepped onto that campus, the weight of his reality bore down on him. He wasn't just another student. He was an outsider, a boy from the wrong side of town who had somehow earned a place among the elite. The whispers began the moment he walked through the doors. Judgmental stares, muffled laughs, and a cold indifference that threatened to shatter his resolve. But what no one knew was that Miguel carried a secret, a burden so heavy it threatened to break him before his first day even began. As he navigated the pristine halls, every step felt like a battle, every glance a reminder that he didn't belong. The tension in the air was palpable, and with each passing second, the stakes grew higher. Miguel's journey had just begun, and nothing could prepare him or those around him for what was about to unfold. In a place where appearances mean everything, Miguel was about to show the world that not all battles are fought with fists, and sometimes the strongest warriors come from the most unexpected places. But will his strength be enough to survive the truth that's about to surface? The harsh blare of a cell phone alarm shattered the pre-dawn silence in a cramped apartment nestled deep within the heart of South Bronx. Miguel Reyes, an 18-year-old Dominican-American, jolted awake, his heart pounding with a mixture of excitement and dread. Today wasn't just any day. It was the day that would determine the course of his entire future. As Miguel's eyes adjusted to the dim light filtering through the tattered curtains, the stark reality of his surroundings came into focus. Peeling wallpaper clung desperately to crumbling walls, while a rusty radiator sputtered and clanked in the corner. The room was barely big enough for his twin bed and a rickety desk piled high with secondhand textbooks. With trembling hands, Miguel reached for his phone, silencing the alarm. As he did, his gaze fell upon a cracked picture frame on his nightstand. Inside was a faded photograph of a woman with kind eyes and a warm smile, his mother, Rosa. Miguel's chest tightened as he thought about her, working the night shift at the hospital, cleaning floors and emptying bedpans just to keep a roof over their heads. "I won't let you down, Mommy," he whispered, running his finger along the edge of the frame. "I promise." Miguel swung his legs over the side of the bed, wincing as his bare feet touched the cold, uneven floor. He made his way to the kitchen, if you could call it that, a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a wobbly table that doubled as both dining surface and study desk. A single chipped plate sat on the table, alongside a handwritten note. "My beautiful boy, today is your day to shine. Show them what a Reyes is made of. Te amo con todo mi corazón." "Mommy." Miguel's vision blurred as he read the words, a lump forming in his throat. He blinked back tears, refusing to let emotion overwhelm him. There would be time for that later. Right now, he had to focus. With practiced efficiency, Miguel went through his morning routine. He showered quickly, the lukewarm water sputtering from the rusted showerhead. As he dried off, he caught a glimpse of himself in the cracked bathroom mirror. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, a testament to countless late nights spent studying by the flickering light of a desk lamp. Miguel's hands shook slightly as he buttoned up his only dress shirt, a hand-me-down from his cousin, carefully ironed the night before. He pulled on his best pair of jeans, wincing at the frayed hems. His sneakers, scuffed and worn, completed the outfit. It wasn't much, but it was the best he had. Taking a deep breath, Miguel stepped out of the apartment and into the harsh reality of the South Bronx. The early morning air was thick with the acrid smell of garbage and car exhaust. Graffiti-covered walls loomed on either side of the narrow street, a canvas of urban despair. As Miguel walked towards the bus stop, he passed familiar scenes that tugged at his heart. A group of young kids, no older than 10 or 11, huddled in an alley, passing around a joint. An elderly woman, her face etched with lines of hardship, rummaged through a dumpster. A pair of rival gang members eyed each other warily from opposite street corners. This was the world Miguel had grown up in, a world of limited choices and crushed dreams. But today he had a chance to break free. The bus ride to Manhattan was a blur of anxiety and anticipation. Miguel clutched his backpack tightly, acutely aware of the acceptance letter tucked safely inside. Full scholarship to Columbia University. The words still seemed unreal, like something out of a dream. As the bus crossed into Manhattan, the world outside the grimy window began to change. Towering skyscrapers replaced crumbling tenements. Well-dressed professionals hurried along clean sidewalks. It was like entering another universe entirely. When Miguel finally stepped off the bus near the Columbia campus, he felt as though he could hardly breathe. The imposing gates loomed before him, a physical barrier between his past and his potential future. Students streamed past him, laughing and chatting, their designer clothes and confident demeanors a stark contrast to Miguel's worn attire and nervous energy. With each step towards the main quad, Miguel felt the weight of 1,000 stares. Whispers and sidelong glances followed him as he navigated the unfamiliar terrain. He could almost hear their thoughts. Who is this guy? He doesn't belong here. Miguel's cheeks burned with shame and anger. He wanted to shout at them, to tell them about the countless hours he'd spent studying, about the sacrifices his mother had made, about the determination that had carried him this far. But he swallowed his words and pressed on, his jaw set in grim determination. As he approached his first class, Miguel's stomach churned with a toxic mix of excitement and terror. This was it, the moment of truth. He paused at the door, taking a deep breath to steady himself. Then, summoning every ounce of courage he possessed, he stepped inside. The classroom fell silent. Every head turned to stare at the newcomer. Miguel felt his face flush as he scanned the room for an empty seat, acutely aware of the designer labels and perfectly coiffed hair surrounding him. He finally spotted a vacant chair in the back row and made his way towards it, keeping his eyes fixed on the floor. Just as Miguel was about to sit down, a voice cut through the silence like a knife. Well, drawled the professor, a middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and an expensive-looking suit. It seems our little Ivy League experiment has arrived. Laughter rippled through the room, and Miguel felt his heart plummet. He gripped the edge of the desk, his knuckles turning white as he fought to maintain his composure. The professor's words hung in the air, a brutal reminder of just how out of place he truly was. But then, something inside Miguel snapped. He thought of his mother, of the countless nights she'd worked to give him this chance. He thought of his neighborhood, of all the bright minds suffocated by poverty and neglect. He thought of every person who had ever told him he couldn't make it. Slowly, deliberately, Miguel raised his head and met the professor's gaze. His voice, when he spoke, was quiet but firm. "My name is Miguel Reyes," he said, each word carefully enunciated. "And I earned my place here, just like everyone else." The room fell silent once more, but this time, the silence held a different quality. Miguel could see surprise, and perhaps a glimmer of respect in some of his classmates' eyes. The professor's smug expression faltered for just a moment before he cleared his throat and turned to the whiteboard. As the lecture began, Miguel opened his notebook and picked up his pen. His hand was steady now, his resolve ironclad. He knew the road ahead would be difficult, perhaps even impossible at times. But he had made it this far, and he wasn't about to give up now. In that moment, as the professor's voice droned on about economic theory, Miguel made a silent vow. He would prove them all wrong. He would show them what a kid from the South Bronx could do. And maybe, just maybe, he would pave the way for others like him to follow. The weight of his dream pressed down on Miguel's shoulders, heavier than ever before. But for the first time since stepping onto campus, he felt truly ready to bear it. Miguel trudged up the worn stairs of his apartment building, his legs heavy with exhaustion. The events of his first day at Columbia played on repeat in his mind, a dizzying mix of humiliation and defiance. As he reached the door to his family's small apartment, he paused, taking a deep breath to compose himself. He didn't want his mother to see how shaken he truly was. With a turn of his key, Miguel stepped inside, immediately enveloped by the familiar sense of home, a mixture of his mother's favorite air freshener and the lingering aroma of yesterday's dinner. "Mommy?" he called out, dropping his backpack by the door. "In here, mi amor." Rosa's voice drifted from the kitchen, sounding strangely strained. Miguel rounded the corner and froze. His mother sat at their tiny kitchen table, her usually neat appearance disheveled, dark circles prominent under her eyes. But it was the expression on her face that made his blood run cold. A mixture of guilt, fear, and profound sadness. "Mommy, what's wrong?" Miguel rushed to her side, kneeling beside her chair. "Are you sick? Did something happen at work?" Rosa shook her head slowly, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "No, mi hijo. I have something I need to tell you. Something I should have told you long ago." Miguel's heart raced as he pulled up a chair, sitting across from his mother. He reached out, taking her work-worn hands in his. "Whatever it is, Mommy, we'll face it together, just like we always have." Rosa let out a shaky breath, squeezing Miguel's hands tightly. "Your scholarship, your chance at Columbia, it's not what you think." Miguel's brow furrowed in confusion. "What do you mean? I earned that scholarship. I worked so hard." Yes, you did," Rosa interrupted, her voice thick with emotion. "You worked harder than anyone I've ever known. But it wasn't enough. The financial aid, even with the scholarship, it wasn't going to cover everything." A chill ran down Miguel's spine. "I don't understand. You said we'd make it work." "You said I lied," Rosa whispered, the words hanging heavy in the air between them. "I lied because I couldn't bear to see your dreams crushed. I couldn't let you give up after everything you'd sacrificed." Miguel felt as though the floor was tilting beneath him. "Mommy, what did you do?" Rosa's eyes finally spilled over, tears tracking down her cheeks. "I made a deal, Miguel. A deal with someone I never thought I'd have to turn to again. Do you remember Tio Javier?" Miguel nodded slowly, recalling the uncle he'd only met a handful of times. A man his mother had always seemed wary of, despite their family connection. "Javier. He's not just your uncle. He's deeply involved with one of the gangs that control our neighborhood. I went to him, begged him for help, and he agreed, but at a price." The world seemed to spin around Miguel as the implications of his mother's words sank in. "No," he whispered, shaking his head in disbelief. "No, Mommy. Tell me you didn't." "I did what I had to do." Rosa's voice rose, tinged with desperation. "I couldn't let you lose this chance, Miguel. You're meant for so much more than this life. I've been helping Javier's people. Nothing too serious at first, just passing messages, keeping an eye out for the police. But lately," Miguel stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. "Lately what, Mommy? What have they made you do?" Rosa's shoulders slumped in defeat. "They've been using my position at the hospital, having me steal medication, falsify records. I didn't want to, Miguel, but Javier said if I backed out now, he'd make sure you lost everything, your scholarship, your spot at Columbia, everything." The silence that followed was deafening. Miguel stared at his mother, the woman who had been his rock, his moral compass, his entire world. He felt as though he was seeing her for the first time, not as the saintly figure he'd built up in his mind, but as a flawed, desperate human being who had crossed lines he never thought she'd cross. "How could you?" Miguel's voice was barely above a whisper, choked with emotion. "Everything you taught me about right and wrong, about working hard and staying honest, was it all a lie?" "No." Rosa reached for him, but Miguel stepped back, out of her reach. "No, mi amor. Those things are still true. I wanted so badly for you to have a better life. I thought I could protect you from the ugly parts of this world, but instead, I've dragged you right into them." Miguel's mind raced, trying to process this new reality. His education, his chance at a better future, it was all built on a foundation of lies and crime. He thought of his classmates at Columbia, of the professor who had sneered at him. What would they think if they knew the truth? "What happens now?" he asked, his voice hollow. Rosa wiped at her tears with trembling hands. "I don't know, mi hijo. Javier. He's starting to ask for more. dangerous things. I'm afraid of what might happen if I refuse, but I'm more afraid of what might happen if I don't. Miguel closed his eyes, feeling the weight of an impossible choice settling onto his shoulders. Everything he had worked for, everything he had dreamed of, was now tainted. But the alternative, giving it all up, watching his mother suffer the consequences of her actions, was equally unthinkable. When he opened his eyes again, he saw his mother watching him, her face etched with fear and guilt and desperate hope. In that moment, Miguel realized that the true test of his character wasn't acing exams or impressing Ivy League professors. It was this, facing an impossible situation with courage and integrity. "We'll figure this out, Mommy," he said softly, moving to embrace his weeping mother. "I don't know how, but we will. Together." As Miguel held his mother, his mind whirled with the magnitude of what lay ahead. He had entered Columbia believing his greatest challenge would be keeping up academically. Now he faced a far greater test, one that would push him to his moral limits and force him to question everything he thought he knew about himself, his family, and the world he was trying so hard to join. The weight of his dream, once a source of motivation, now felt like a crushing burden. But as Miguel comforted his distraught mother, he made a silent vow. He would find a way out of this mess, a way to honor both his ambitions and his integrity. The path forward was unclear, fraught with danger and moral ambiguity. But Miguel was determined to forge ahead, carrying the hopes of his mother and his community on his shoulders. Little did he know, this was only the beginning of a journey that would test him in ways he could never have imagined. The early morning light filtered through the grimy window of Miguel's bedroom, casting long shadows across the worn floorboards. He hadn't slept a wink, his mind a turbulent sea of conflicting thoughts and emotions. The weight of his mother's revelation pressed down on him like a physical force, making it hard to breathe. Miguel sat on the edge of his bed, staring at the acceptance letter from Columbia that he'd pinned to his wall. The prestigious logo, once a symbol of hope and achievement, now seemed to mock him. Every word on that paper was tainted, purchased with his mother's compromised morality and the dirty money of his uncle's gang. A soft knock on his door jolted Miguel from his reverie. "Miguel," his mother's voice was hesitant, laden with guilt. "Can we talk?" He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath before answering. "Come in, Mommy." Rosa entered, looking as though she'd aged years overnight. She perched uncertainly on the chair by Miguel's desk, her hands twisting nervously in her lap. Have you made a decision?" Miguel met his mother's gaze, seeing the fear and desperate hope in her eyes. He thought about the sacrifices she'd made, the risks she'd taken, all for him. But he also thought about the principles she'd instilled in him since childhood. Honesty, integrity, the importance of doing the right thing no matter the cost. "I can't give up on this, Mommy," Miguel said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. "I know it's wrong. I know the money is tainted. But if I walk away now, everything you've done will be for nothing." Relief flooded Rosa's face, quickly followed by shame. "Oh, mi hijo. But," Miguel continued, his tone hardening, "we need to find a way out of this. I won't let you keep working for Tío Javier. We'll figure something out. Maybe I can get a job? Take out loans?" Rosa shook her head vehemently. "No, Miguel. You need to focus on your studies. And loans, they wouldn't be enough. Not for Columbia. Then what do we do?" Miguel's voice cracked with frustration. "I can't just pretend everything's normal while you're out there risking your life and freedom." Rosa reached out, taking Miguel's hands in hers. "Listen to me, my love. You go to your classes. You study hard. You make the most of this opportunity. Leave Javier and his people to me. I'll find a way to handle it." Miguel wanted to argue, to insist that they face this together. But he saw the determination in his mother's eyes, the same stubborn resolve that had gotten them through so many hard times before. He nodded slowly, feeling the weight of guilt and responsibility settle more firmly on his shoulders. As Miguel made his way to the Columbia campus that morning, the world around him seemed altered. The streets of the South Bronx, once so familiar, now felt dangerous and oppressive. He imagined gang members lurking in every shadow, waiting to collect on the debt his family owed. Entering the immaculate grounds of Colombia was like stepping into another dimension. Miguel's worn sneakers scuffed against the manicured lawns, a jarring reminder of how out of place he was. As he walked to his first class, he overheard snippets of conversation from his fellow students, discussions about weekend trips to the Hamptons, internships at prestigious firms, family legacies at the university. Miguel's cheeks burned with a mixture of shame and resentment. These people had no idea of the real world, of the impossible choices faced by families like his. For a moment, he was tempted to shout at them, to shake them out of their privileged bubble and make them understand the true cost of his presence among them. But he swallowed his anger, forcing himself to focus on the task at hand. He had made his choice, now he had to live with it, had to make it worth the price his mother was paying. In class, Miguel threw himself into his studies with a fervor that bordered on desperation. He raised his hand to answer questions, engaged in debates, and took meticulous notes. Some of his classmates eyed him warily, put off by his intensity. Others seemed impressed, even a little intimidated. One of his professors, Dr. Harriet Chun, pulled him aside after class. "Mr. Reyes," she said, her tone a mixture of concern and admiration, "I must say your contributions today were exceptional, but I couldn't help noticing. Is everything all right? You seem on edge." Miguel froze, his heart pounding. For a wild moment, he considered telling her everything about his mother, about the gang, about the crushing weight of the secret he was carrying. But he pushed the impulse down, forcing a smile onto his face. "Everything's fine, Professor Chun," he lied smoothly. "I'm just eager to prove myself, I guess." Dr. Chun studied him for a moment longer, then nodded. "Well, keep up the good work. But remember, Mr. Reyes, university isn't just about academic achievement. It's about growth, about finding yourself. Don't lose sight of that in your pursuit of grades." As Miguel left the classroom, her words echoed in his mind. Finding himself? He almost laughed at the irony. He had never felt more lost, more unsure of who he was or what he stood for. The days blurred together in a haze of lectures, study sessions, and sleepless nights. Miguel threw himself into his coursework with single-minded determination, as if academic success could somehow absolve him of the guilt he felt. He began to avoid his classmates, turning down invitations to study groups and social events. The less they knew about him, he reasoned, the less chance there was of his secret coming to light. But even as he excelled in his classes, Miguel could feel the strain of his double life taking its toll. Dark circles deepened under his eyes, and he lost weight as meals became an afterthought. Worst of all was the constant fear for his mother, fear of discovery, fear of the future that seemed to be slipping further out of his control with each passing day. One evening, as Miguel sat hunched over his textbooks in the library, his phone buzzed with a text from his mother. "Javier wants to meet, says it's important. What should I do?" Miguel stared at the screen, his vision blurring as panic clawed at his chest. This was the moment he had been dreading, the moment when his two worlds would collide, when the precarious balance he had been maintaining would finally shatter. With trembling fingers, he typed out a response. "Don't go alone. I'm coming home now." As Miguel hurried out of the library, his mind raced with the possible outcomes of this meeting. Would Javier demand more from them? Would he threaten to expose their arrangement? Or was this finally the chance Miguel had been waiting for, an opportunity to confront the man who held their future in his hands? Whatever lay ahead, Miguel knew one thing for certain. The decision he had made to continue his studies, to pursue his dreams at any cost, was about to be put to the ultimate test. As he boarded the subway back to the Bronx, he steeled himself for the confrontation to come, praying that he would have the strength and wisdom to protect his mother and salvage what remained of their shared dream. The train hurtled through the darkness, carrying Miguel towards a future more uncertain than ever before. But despite the fear churning in his gut, a small part of him felt a grim sense of relief. At least now, finally, he would have the chance to take action, to face the consequences of his choices head-on and, perhaps, to find a way forward that he could live with. As the familiar streets of his neighborhood came into view, Miguel took a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. Whatever happened next, he knew there was no turning back. The time for difficult decisions was far from over. The South Bronx streets seemed to close in around Miguel as he hurried towards home, his heart pounding in sync with his rapid footsteps. The once familiar neighborhood now felt alien and threatening, every shadow potentially concealing one of Tio Javier's men. As he rounded the corner to his apartment building, Miguel spotted his mother standing nervously by the entrance, her eyes darting up and down the street. "Mommy?" Miguel called out, quickening his pace. Rosa's face crumpled with relief at the sight of her son. "Oh, Miguel," she whispered, pulling him into a tight embrace. "I'm so sorry. I never wanted you to be involved in this." Miguel pulled back, his hands gripping his mother's shoulders. "It's okay, Mommy. We're in this together now. Where's Tio Javier?" As if summoned by his name, a sleek black SUV with tinted windows pulled up to the curb. The back door opened, and out stepped Javier Reyes, a man Miguel barely recognized from his childhood memories. Gone was the boisterous uncle who'd slip him candy at family gatherings. In his place stood a hard-faced man in an expensive suit, his eyes cold and calculating. "Miguel," Javier said, his voice a low rumble. "It's been a long time, Sobrino. You've grown." Miguel instinctively stepped in front of his mother, shielding her. "What do you want, Tio?" Javier's lips curled into a humorless smile. "Straight to business, eh? Good. We need to talk about your mother's contributions to our organization." Before Miguel could respond, the wail of police sirens split the air. Red and blue lights flashed at the end of the street, growing rapidly closer. "Mierda!" Javier spat, his composure cracking. He turned to Rosa, his eyes blazing. "You set me up?" "No!" Rosa cried, genuine shock in her voice. "I swear, Javier, I didn't." But Javier was already retreating to his vehicle. As he yanked open the door, he fixed Miguel with a look of pure venom. "This isn't over, boy. Not by a long shot." The SUV peeled away just as the first police cruiser rounded the corner. Everything after that was a blur of shouted commands, hands roughly pulling Miguel and Rosa apart, the cold bite of handcuffs on his wrists. Miguel found himself in a stark interrogation room, facing a hard-eyed detective who seemed more interested in Miguel's connection to Javier than in hearing his side of the story. "Look, kid," the detective Ramirez, according to his badge, said, leaning across the table. "We've been building a case against your uncle's operation for months. We know your mother's been involved. The question is, how deep are you in this?" Miguel's mind raced. He thought of his mother, probably in a room just like this one, facing similar questions. He thought of Colombia, of the future he'd been fighting so hard to secure. In that moment, he made a decision that would alter the course of his life forever. "I'll tell you everything," Miguel said, his voice steady despite the tremor in his hands. "But I want a deal for my mother. She was coerced into this. She doesn't deserve to go to prison." Detective Ramirez leaned back, studying Miguel with newfound interest. "That's not really how this works, kid. But let's hear what you have to say." For the next several hours, Miguel laid out everything he knew, which, he realized with growing horror, was far more than he'd ever admitted to himself. He spoke of overheard conversations, of suspicious packages his mother had handled, of the web of connections that linked his family to Javier's criminal empire. By the time Miguel finished, the first rays of dawn were peeking through the grimy window of the interrogation room. His throat was raw, his eyes burning with exhaustion and unshed tears. Detective Ramirez stood, gathering his notes. "You've given us a lot to work with, Reyes. I can't make any promises, but I'll talk to the DA about your mother's situation. In the meantime," the detective's words faded into background noise as Miguel's phone, which had been buzzing periodically throughout the night, lit up with a news alert. With a sense of creeping dread, he read the headline: "Columbia University student implicated in major drug bust. The article went on to detail the arrest of Rosa Reyes and her son, Miguel, a scholarship student at Columbia, in connection with a large-scale narcotics operation in the South Bronx. The piece included a quote from a Columbia spokesperson, stating that the university was deeply troubled by the allegations and would be reviewing Mr. Reyes' status as a student. Miguel's vision blurred, the words on the screen swimming before his eyes. This was it, the moment his two worlds collided in spectacular, devastating fashion. Everything he had worked for, every sacrifice his mother had made, was now laid bare for the world to see and judge. As he was led back to his holding cell, Miguel caught snippets of conversation from the officers around him. "Can you believe it? A Columbia kid mixed up in this. I always said those scholarship programs were a mistake. Bringing in riffraff like this." Each word was a dagger to Miguel's heart. He thought of his classmates, his professors. How would they look at him now? The memory of Dr. Chen's words echoed mockingly in his mind. University is about finding yourself. Well, he had certainly found himself now, at the center of a storm that threatened to sweep away everything he had ever cared about. In the cold solitude of his cell, Miguel finally allowed the tears to fall. He wept for his mother, for the dreams they had shared, for the future that now seemed hopelessly out of reach. But most of all, he wept for the boy he had been just a few short months ago. The boy who had believed that hard work and determination were enough to overcome any obstacle. As exhaustion finally claimed him, Miguel's last conscious thought was a desperate prayer, not for himself, but for his mother. Whatever happened next, whatever price he had to pay, he silently vowed to do whatever it took to protect her. It was the least he could do, after all she had sacrificed for him. Little did Miguel know, his ordeal was far from over. The coming days would test him in ways he could never have imagined, forcing him to confront hard truths about himself, his family, and the society he had so desperately wanted to join. The fall from grace had begun, and there was no telling how far he had yet to fall. The harsh fluorescent lights of the courthouse corridor seemed to pulse in rhythm with Miguel's pounding heart. He sat on a hard bench outside the courtroom, his ill-fitting suit a constant reminder of how far he had fallen. It had been 3 weeks since the arrest, 3 weeks of isolation, interrogations, and sleepless nights in a cell that felt more like a tomb for his dreams. Miguel Reyes? A voice cut through his thoughts. He looked up to see a middle-aged woman in a crisp blazer approaching. "I'm Andrea Lawson, your court-appointed attorney. We need to talk strategy before your hearing." Miguel nodded numbly, following Ms. Lawson to a small conference room. As she laid out his options in a matter-of-fact tone, Miguel's mind drifted. He thought of his mother, who he hadn't been allowed to see since their arrest. He thought of Columbia, of the life he had barely begun to taste before it was snatched away. "Mr. Reyes? Are you listening?" Ms. Lawson's sharp tone snapped him back to reality. "This is important. The prosecution is offering a plea deal. In exchange for your continued cooperation and testimony against your uncle's organization, they're willing to drop the most serious charges. You'd be looking at probation instead of jail time." Miguel's breath caught in his throat. "And my mother? What about her?" Ms. Lawson's expression softened slightly. "They're offering her a similar deal. Reduced charges, minimal jail time. But it all hinges on your cooperation, Mr. Reyes. You need to decide if you're willing to testify." The weight of the decision pressed down on Miguel like a physical force. To testify meant betraying his family, exposing the dark underbelly of the community that had raised him. But to refuse, the thought of his mother behind bars, of throwing away his own future, was unbearable. "I'll do it," Miguel said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I'll testify." The next few hours passed in a blur of legal proceedings and paperwork. As Miguel signed his name on the plea agreement, he felt as though he was signing away a piece of his soul. But when he finally saw his mother in the courtroom, her eyes red-rimmed but filled with love and worry, he knew he had made the right choice. As they left the courthouse, a barrage of camera flashes and shouted questions assaulted them. "Mr. Reyes, how does it feel to throw away an Ivy League education? Mrs. Reyes, did you raise your son to be a criminal?" Miguel instinctively shielded his mother from the onslaught, hurrying her towards the waiting car. Back in their apartment, which felt smaller and shabbier than ever, Miguel and Rosa sat in heavy silence. Finally, Rosa spoke, her voice thick with emotion. "I'm so sorry, Mijo. This is all my fault. If I hadn't—" "No, Mommy," Miguel interrupted, taking her hands in his. "We both made choices. We'll face the consequences together." But even as he spoke the words, Miguel knew that the hardest part was yet to come. The plea deal had spared them from prison, but the court of public opinion was far less forgiving. The next morning, Miguel steeled himself and opened his laptop. His inbox was flooded with emails, some from concerned classmates, others from professors expressing their disappointment. But it was the message from the dean of students that made his blood run cold. "Dear Mr. Reyes, in light of recent events and your admission of involvement in criminal activities, Columbia University has no choice but to terminate your enrollment, effective immediately. Your scholarship has been revoked." The words blurred as tears filled Miguel's eyes. He had known this was coming, but seeing it in black and white made it devastatingly real. His dream, the future he had fought so hard for, was gone. As the days passed, Miguel found himself adrift. He couldn't bear to leave the apartment, knowing that every neighbor's stare, every whispered comment, was a reminder of his fall from grace. He spent hours scouring job listings, only to close the browser in frustration. Who would hire a college dropout with a criminal record? It was during one of these fruitless job searches that Miguel received a text from an unknown number. "We need to talk. Meet me at the old basketball court. 8 p.m. Come alone. Jay." Miguel's heart raced as he realized who Jay must be. Tío Javier, the man he had betrayed, the architect of his family's downfall. Every instinct screamed at him to ignore the message, to stay safe in the confines of his apartment. But a small, reckless part of him saw an opportunity, a chance to confront the source of all this pain, to maybe find a way to set things right. As the sun set over the Bronx, casting long shadows across the cracked pavement of the basketball court, Miguel made his decision. He would meet Javier, face whatever consequences came his way. After all, he reasoned bitterly, what more did he have to lose? Miguel slipped out of the apartment, leaving a note for his mother saying he'd gone for a walk. The streets were eerily quiet as he made his way to the meeting spot, his every sense on high alert. As he approached the chain-link fence surrounding the court, he saw a lone figure standing in the center, illuminated by a flickering streetlight. "Tío Javier," Miguel called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "I'm here. What do you want?" Javier turned, his face a mask of cold fury. "What do I want, Sabrino? I want back everything you cost me with your little confession. I want you to understand the price of betraying family." As Javier spoke, Miguel became aware of movement in the shadows. 2 burly men emerged, flanking him on either side. Miguel's heart hammered in his chest as he realized the gravity of his mistake. This wasn't a meeting, it was an ambush. "Wait," Miguel said, raising his hands placatingly. "I can explain. I can make this right." Javier's laugh was devoid of humor. "Make it right? Oh, Miguel, you have no idea how right I'm about to make things." As the men closed in, Miguel's mind raced. He thought of his mother, waiting at home, unaware of the danger he had walked into. He thought of the future he had lost, of the dreams that had slipped through his fingers. And in that moment, faced with the consequences of every choice that had led him to this point, Miguel made one final, desperate decision. He ran. The sound of pounding footsteps and angry shouts filled the night air as Miguel sprinted away from the basketball court, his lungs burning, his legs pumping furiously. He had no plan, no destination in mind, only the primal urge to survive, to escape the fate that Javier had planned for him. As he rounded a corner, nearly colliding with a startled pedestrian, Miguel realized with a sinking feeling that his ordeal was far from over. The price of truth, it seemed, was steeper than he could have ever imagined. And as the sounds of pursuit grew closer, Miguel knew that the next few moments would determine not just his future, but whether he had a future at all. Miguel's lungs burned as he sprinted through the labyrinthine streets of the South Bronx, the sound of his pursuers echoing off the buildings. His mind raced, searching for a way out of this nightmare. As he rounded a corner, he spotted a familiar face, Officer Ramirez, the detective who had interrogated him weeks ago. "Help!" Miguel gasped, stumbling towards the police car. "They're after me." Ramirez's eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with suspicion. "Reyes? What's going on?" Before Miguel could explain, Javier and his men appeared at the end of the street. Time seemed to slow as Miguel watched a series of emotions flicker across Ramirez's face. Surprise, understanding, and then resignation. "I'm sorry, kid," Ramirez said, his voice heavy. "But you're in deeper than you know." With a sickening jolt, Miguel realized the truth. Ramirez wasn't here to help. He was part of it all. "No," Miguel whispered, backing away. "This can't be happening." Ramirez reached for his handcuffs. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be, Reyes." In that moment, with his world crumbling around him, Miguel made a split-second decision. He turned and ran, ignoring Ramirez's shouts and the renewed pursuit of Javier's men. Miguel ran until his legs gave out, collapsing in a secluded alley. As he gasped for breath, the full weight of his situation crashed down upon him. He was alone, hunted by both criminals and corrupt cops, with nowhere to turn. His phone buzzed, a text from his mother. "Mijo, where are you? Please come home. I'm worried." Tears stung Miguel's eyes as he realized he couldn't go home. He couldn't risk leading Javier or Ramirez to his mother. With trembling fingers, he typed out a response. "I'm safe, Mommy. I love you. I'm sorry for everything." As the adrenaline faded, exhaustion took over. Miguel found a hidden spot behind a dumpster and curled up, his mind racing with the revelations of the night. How deep did this corruption go? Was there anyone he could trust? He must have dozed off because the next thing he knew, he was being shaken awake. Miguel's eyes flew open, his heart pounding. But instead of Javier or Ramirez, he found himself looking into the concerned face of an older woman. "You can't stay here, young man," she said gently. "It's not safe." Miguel scrambled to his feet, ready to run again, but something in the woman's eyes made him pause. "Who are you?" "My name is Gloria," she replied. "I run a shelter for at-risk youth a few blocks from here. You look like you could use a safe place to rest and figure things out." Every instinct screamed at Miguel to be cautious, but he was out of options. Warily, he followed Gloria through the pre-dawn streets to a nondescript building. Inside, he found a clean, if sparse, dormitory and a small cafeteria where a few early risers were having breakfast. "Get some food and rest," Gloria said. "We can talk more later if you want." Too exhausted to argue, Miguel did as she suggested. As he lay on a narrow cot, his mind whirled with the events of the past 24 hours. How had his life spiraled so far out of control? And more importantly, how could he possibly find a way out of this mess? It was late afternoon when Miguel finally emerged from a fitful sleep. He found Gloria in her small office, sorting through paperwork. "Feeling better?" she asked, gesturing for him to sit. Miguel nodded hesitantly. "Thank you for helping me. But why? You don't know me." Gloria's eyes softened. "I know more than you think, Miguel Reyes." Miguel stiffened, ready to bolt, but Gloria held up a hand. "Relax. I'm not here to hurt you. In fact, I've been waiting for you to find your way here." "What do you mean?" Miguel asked, confusion and wariness warring within him. Gloria sighed, leaning back in her chair. "Your mother and we have a history. Rosa and I grew up together in this neighborhood. We both got involved with Javier's organization when we were young and stupid. But I got out. Rosa didn't." Miguel's mind reeled with this new information. "So you know about everything? About what my mom did? About Javier?" Gloria nodded solemnly. "I've been watching from the sidelines, hoping Rosa would find a way out. When I heard about your arrest and the plea deal, I knew it was only a matter of time before things came to a head. But why didn't you help us before? Miguel demanded, anger flaring. Why wait until now? It's complicated, Miguel, Gloria replied, her voice heavy with regret. I couldn't risk exposing myself or this shelter. But now things have changed. Javier's operation is crumbling, and the corrupt cops who've been protecting him are scrambling to cover their tracks. Miguel leaned forward, hope kindling for the first time in weeks. So what does this mean? Can you help us? Gloria's expression turned grave. I can try, but you need to understand. Miguel, this goes deeper than you know. Your mother, she wasn't just a low-level player in Javier's organization. She was key to their entire operation. The words hit Miguel like a physical blow. What are you saying? I'm saying, Gloria continued, her eyes locked on Miguel's, that your mother was the one who built the network that allowed Javier to operate undetected for so long. She was the mastermind behind their money laundering scheme. Miguel shook his head in disbelief. No, that's impossible. My mom, she wouldn't. She did, Gloria said softly. And that's why you're in so much danger now. You're not just a liability because of what you know. You're valuable because of who you are, Rosa Reyes' son. The world seemed to tilt on its axis as Miguel struggled to process this information. His mother, the woman who had raised him, who had taught him right from wrong, was not just a reluctant participant in Javier's crimes, but a key player? I don't understand, Miguel whispered, his voice cracking. Why would she do this? Why would she risk everything? Gloria's expression softened with sympathy. For you, Miguel, everything she did, every risk she took, it was all to give you a better life, to give you opportunities she never had. The irony of it all hit Miguel like a punch to the gut. His mother's attempts to secure his future had ended up destroying it. And now, he was caught in the middle of a dangerous game he barely understood. What do I do now? Miguel asked, feeling more lost than ever. Gloria leaned forward, her voice low and urgent. You have a choice to make, Miguel. You can run. I can help you disappear, start a new life somewhere far from here. Or you can stay and fight, help bring down Javier's organization once and for all, and maybe, just maybe, find a way to save your mother in the process. As Miguel weighed his options, he realized that this was more than just a decision about his immediate future. It was a choice that would define who he was, what he stood for. Would he run from the truth or face it head-on? With a deep breath, Miguel met Gloria's gaze. I want to fight. I want to make this right. Gloria nodded, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth. I hoped you'd say that, but I have to warn you, Miguel, the path ahead won't be easy. You'll have to confront some hard truths about your mother, about yourself. Are you sure you're ready for that? Miguel thought of his mother, of the sacrifices she had made, misguided as they were. He thought of the future he had dreamed of, the person he had wanted to become. And he realized that maybe, just maybe, this was his chance to become that person, not through academic achievement, but through facing the harsh realities of the world he came from. I'm ready, Miguel said, his voice steady despite the fear churning in his gut. Tell me what I need to do. As Gloria began to outline their next steps, Miguel felt a strange mix of terror and exhilaration. He was about to embark on the most dangerous journey of his life, a journey that would test his courage, his integrity, and his understanding of right and wrong. But for the first time since his arrest, he felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, he could find a way to salvage something from the wreckage of his dreams. Little did Miguel know, the revelations of the day were just the beginning. The true test of his character and the biggest shocks were yet to come. The next few weeks passed in a blur of clandestine meetings, late-night stakeouts, and heart-pounding close calls. Miguel, under Gloria's guidance, slowly began to unravel the intricate web of corruption that had ensnared his family and community for years. Each new piece of information he uncovered felt like another blow to his already fragile worldview. One rainy night, as Miguel and Gloria huddled in her car outside a warehouse suspected of being one of Javier's distribution centers, Miguel finally asked the question that had been burning in his mind. Gloria, he began hesitantly. If my mom was so deeply involved in all of this, why did she let me take the fall? Why didn't she come clean about everything? Gloria sighed, her eyes never leaving the warehouse. Your mother, she's a complicated woman, Miguel. I think, in her mind, sacrificing herself would have meant sacrificing you too. She probably thought that by letting you take a lesser charge, she was protecting you. Miguel shook his head, frustration bubbling up inside him. But it wasn't protection. It was selfish. Gloria finished for him. Maybe, but love often is. Before Miguel could respond, movement at the warehouse caught their attention. They watched in tense silence as several figures emerged, one of whom Miguel recognized with a jolt as Officer Ramirez. We've got them, Gloria whispered, snapping photos with a long-lens camera. This is the evidence we need to prove the police corruption. As they drove back to the shelter, Miguel felt a mixture of triumph and dread. They were getting closer to bringing down Javier's organization, but each step forward also brought him closer to a confrontation he both longed for and feared, facing his mother with the truth. The next morning, as Miguel pored over the evidence they gathered, his burner phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I know what you're doing. Meet me at the old church. Alone. Mom. Miguel's heart raced as he showed the message to Gloria. It could be a trap, she warned. Or it could be our chance to finally get the whole truth, Miguel countered. After a long debate, they agreed that Miguel would go, but with Gloria and a trusted contact in the FBI monitoring from a distance. As Miguel approached the dilapidated church, memories of childhood Sundays flooded back. He found his mother sitting in a pew near the front, her face etched with lines of worry and fatigue. Mijo, she said softly as he sat beside her. I'm so sorry for everything. Miguel felt a lump form in his throat. Why, Mommy? Why did you do it? Rosa's eyes filled with tears. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I could give you a better life, keep you away from all of this. But I was wrong. I see that now. As Rosa began to explain, filling in the gaps of Miguel's understanding, he felt a whirlwind of emotions. Anger, betrayal, but also a deep, aching love for the woman who had sacrificed everything for him, however misguided her actions had been. I want to make it right, Rosa said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm ready to turn myself in, to tell the authorities everything. But Javier, he knows I'm planning to talk. He's threatened to hurt you if I do. Miguel's blood ran cold. So what are you going to do? Rosa took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. I'm going to protect you one last time. I've arranged a meeting with Javier tonight. I'll wear a wire, get him to incriminate himself. It's the only way to bring him down for good. No, Miguel exclaimed, grabbing his mother's hands. It's too dangerous. Let me do it. I can. No, Mijo, Rosa interrupted firmly. I started this. I need to finish it. As they left the church, Miguel's mind raced. He couldn't let his mother sacrifice herself like this. There had to be another way. Back at the shelter, Miguel shared everything with Gloria and their FBI contact, Agent Thompson. As they debated their options, a plan began to form in Miguel's mind. A plan that would put him at the center of danger, but might just save his mother and bring down Javier's empire once and for all. I'll do it, Miguel said, his voice steady despite the fear coursing through him. I'll meet Javier wearing the wire. He won't suspect me. And Mom, we'll keep her safe. Gloria and Agent Thompson tried to talk him out of it, but Miguel was resolute. This was his chance to make things right, to be the person he'd always aspired to be. As night fell, Miguel found himself approaching the same basketball court where this nightmare had begun weeks ago. His heart pounded so loudly he was sure Javier would hear it, even from a distance. Well, Javier's voice cut through the darkness. The prodigal nephew returns. Miguel steeled himself, channeling every ounce of courage he possessed. I want to make a deal, Tio. I want in. Javier's eyebrows shot up in surprise. You? After everything? Why should I trust you? Because I have something you need? Miguel replied, forcing confidence into his voice. Information. About the feds. About who's really pulling the strings in this neighborhood. As Miguel spun his tale, carefully crafted to draw out Javier's confessions, he felt a mixture of disgust and pity for his uncle. This man, who had once seemed so powerful and intimidating, now appeared desperate and cornered. Just as Javier was about to reveal the details of his operation, a shout rang out. FBI! Freeze! In the chaos that followed, Miguel lost sight of Javier. Gunshots echoed through the night air. Miguel's heart stopped as he spotted his mother running towards him, her face a mask of terror. "Miguel!" she cried out. "Look out!" Time seemed to slow as Miguel turned, seeing Javier emerge from the shadows, gun raised. Without thinking, Miguel threw himself in front of his mother just as a shot rang out. Pain exploded in Miguel's shoulder as he fell to the ground. Through the haze of agony, he heard more shouts, more gunfire. Then suddenly silence. When Miguel opened his eyes, he was in a hospital bed, his mother holding his hand, tears streaming down her face. "Oh, Mijo," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." Over the next few days, as Miguel recovered, the full story emerged. Javier had been arrested, along with several corrupt police officers. Rosa, true to her word, had turned herself in and was cooperating fully with the authorities. Her testimony, combined with the evidence Miguel and Gloria had gathered, was enough to bring down the entire operation. As for Miguel, his actions had not gone unnoticed. Agent Thompson visited him in the hospital, offering him a chance at redemption, a position in a special youth outreach program, working to keep kids away from the life that had nearly destroyed his family. Sitting in his hospital bed, looking out at the city he'd grown up in, a city that now held both painful memories and new possibilities, Miguel felt a sense of peace wash over him. The path ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in months, he felt like he was exactly where he needed to be. His dreams of Colombia, of academic success and a life far removed from the South Bronx, seemed distant now. But in their place, Miguel found a new purpose, a chance to make a real difference in his community, to be the change he'd always hoped to see. As he drifted off to sleep, Miguel's last thoughts were of gratitude. For Gloria, who had shown him a way forward. For his mother, whose love, however misguided, had never wavered. And for the strength he'd found within himself to face the truth and fight for what was right. The scholarship that had changed everything was gone. But in its place, Miguel had found something far more valuable, a second chance, and the courage to make the most of it. 6 months had passed since the dramatic night that brought down Javier's empire. Miguel sat in a small, sunlit office at the South Bronx Community Center, staring at the computer screen before him. His shoulder, now fully healed, occasionally twinged a permanent reminder of how close he'd come to losing everything. A knock at the door jolted him from his thoughts. "Come in," he called out. Gloria entered, a stack of papers in her arms and a warm smile on her face. "How's the grant proposal coming along, Miguel?" Miguel ran a hand through his hair, sighing. Slowly. Who knew there'd be so much paperwork involved in trying to help people? Gloria chuckled, setting the papers on his desk. "Welcome to the nonprofit world, kid. But trust me, it's worth it." As they discussed the details of their latest youth outreach program, Miguel marveled at how much his life had changed. The FBI's youth liaison position had evolved into a full-time role at Gloria's community center. Every day, he worked to provide opportunities and support for kids facing the same challenges he had: poverty, gang pressure, the allure of easy money. But even as Miguel found purpose in his new life, the weight of unfinished business pressed on him. His mother, Rosa, was serving a reduced sentence thanks to her cooperation. Their relationship, though strained, was slowly healing through weekly visits and long, honest conversations. As Gloria was leaving, she paused at the door. "Oh, I almost forgot. This came for you." She handed Miguel a thick envelope bearing the seal of Columbia University. Miguel's heart raced as he tore open the envelope. Inside was a letter from the Dean of Students. "Dear Mr. Reyes, In light of recent events and new information that has come to our attention, Columbia University is reviewing its decision regarding your enrollment. Miguel's hands shook as he read on. The university was offering him a chance to reapply, citing his extraordinary circumstances and demonstrated commitment to community service. Emotions warred within him: hope, fear, uncertainty. Could he really go back? Did he even want to? That evening, Miguel visited his mother in prison, the letter burning a hole in his pocket. As they sat across from each other in the visitation room, he finally broached the subject. "Mommy, I got a letter from Columbia today. They're willing to reconsider my enrollment." Rosa's eyes widened, a mix of joy and pain crossing her face. "Oh, Mijo, that's wonderful news, isn't it?" Miguel hesitated. "I don't know, Mommy. So much has changed. I'm not sure if that's my path anymore." Rosa reached across the table, taking his hand in hers. "Miguel, listen to me. Everything I did, all the mistakes I made, it was because I wanted you to have choices. Real choices, not just the ones this neighborhood forced on us. This is your chance to make the choice for yourself." Tears pricked at Miguel's eyes. "But what about the community center? The kids we're helping. You can help them no matter what you choose," Rosa said softly. "The question is, what do you want for yourself?" As Miguel left the prison, his mother's words echoed in his mind. For so long, his actions had been driven by others' expectations, his mother's dreams, his community's limitations, society's judgments. Now, for perhaps the first time, the choice was truly his. Over the next few weeks, Miguel threw himself into soul-searching. He spoke with Gloria, with Agent Thompson, with the kids at the center. He revisited the Columbia campus, this time seeing it not as an escape, but as another tool to effect change. Finally, on a crisp autumn morning, Miguel made his decision. He would return to Columbia, but not as the same person who had left. He would bring with him the hard-won wisdom of his experiences, the commitment to his community, and a new understanding of the complexities of justice and redemption. As Miguel stood before the admission committee, sharing his story and his vision for the future, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. Whatever their decision, he knew he was on the right path. 3 weeks later, Miguel received the news. He had been readmitted to Columbia on a probationary basis. As he shared the news with Gloria at the community center, she pulled him into a fierce hug. "I'm so proud of you," she whispered. "But don't you dare forget about us while you're up there with the ivy and the ivory towers." Miguel laughed, blinking back tears. "Never. This place, these kids, they're a part of me now. I'm going to find a way to bridge both worlds." And so, as the leaves turned golden and a new semester approached, Miguel Reyes prepared to embark on yet another new chapter of his life. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, balancing his studies with his commitment to the community center, navigating the social complexities of campus life with his unusual background, continuing to heal his relationship with his mother. But as he packed his bags, carefully placing the faded photo of his mother next to his textbooks, Miguel felt ready to face whatever came next. The scholarship that had changed everything had led him down an unexpected path, full of pain and loss, but also growth and redemption. As he took one last look around his small room in the Bronx, Miguel smiled to himself. He wasn't just going to Columbia to study anymore. He was going there to make a difference, to be a bridge between two worlds, and to prove that second chances, when seized with both hands, could lead to extraordinary things. The boy who had once seen Columbia as an escape now saw it as a tool for change. And as Miguel stepped out into the bright September morning, ready to begin anew, he carried with him the hopes, dreams, and lessons of the community that had shaped him. His journey was far from over. In fact, it was just beginning. Thank you very much for listening to this story. Comment below what you thought of the ending and from which city you're listening to us. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more, click on the next story that's appearing on your screen now. Leave your like and subscribe to our channel so we can build a huge community that shares inspiring stories together. See you soon.